Hello and welcome to a new topic, Ferdinand de Saussure's Circuit of Speech. Ferdinand de Saussure's Circuit of Speech can also be sometimes named as model of communication. So we can say Saussure's Circuit of Speech or model of communication. Circuit of speech. The word circuit, it comes from Latin circuitus and it means going around, moving around, revolving around, and speech, as you know, is related to communication. This is basically the fundamental concept, literal interpretation of circuit of speech. Now let's discuss the idea behind Saussure's model of communication or circuit of speech. Okay, look here, for any communication to take place, we need a person, and we have a person here, and then we need another person, and we have this person in front of us. So the first person we can call it A, and the second person we can call it B. Now the first person wants to communicate with the second person B. He wants to express his ideas, he wants to share his thoughts, he wants to communicate with the second person. So as he tries to communicate, what does happen? Mental concept. The first person thinks about an idea. He forms an opinion. He develops a concept. That is what we call mental concept. Until you have an idea in your mind, until you have a thought in your mind, until you know what you are going to speak, the formation of opinion, the formation of thought, the formation of idea, this is what we call mental concept originates in our mind. If there is no origin of any idea in your mind, can the communication take place? Can you express your thoughts? Of course not. So first step is the formation of idea, what we call mental concept. And after you form opinion, after you develop mental concept, after an idea originates in your mind, then what you need? You need sound. That is to say, sound represents mental concept. That is to say, in other words, representation of mental concept through sound. Without sound, without yourself raising your voice, can the second person listen? Of course not. So the sound is the representation of what you have in your mind. According to Saussure, terms is psychological process. This is the psychological preparation to start the conversation, to start the speech, to develop the interaction between the two persons. And once you are now ready to raise your voice, what we need, the third step, is vocal organs, through which you want to produce sounds, through which you want to speak. Without the help of vocal organs like larynx and pharynx and lips and the tip of the tongue, because there are a lot of mechanisms that take place when we produce a sound. According to Saussure, this is known as physiological process. And after vocal organs help you produce utterance, then what we need is, fourth step, sound waves. Now you have already spoken, and when you speak something, your voice moves into the air. It is with the help of these sound waves, what you speak, what you utter, travels to the second person, that is to say B. He listens to you, he hears you, and after he hears you, he listens to you, he knows what you are talking about. Then what does the second person do is that he decodes the message. He tries to understand what you say. He tries to calculate in his mind the idea of what you have spoken to him. So decoding message is like understanding what you have said. And once he decodes the message, like the first person, he also needs the sound. He also needs to raise his voice. He also needs to find a way to speak. And how can he speak? Like the first person, the second person will also use his organs of speech through vocal organs, what we already talked about, to produce sounds, physiological process. And once your vocal organs help you to speak or produce an utterance, then sound, your voice goes into the ear, and then through the sound waves, it goes back to the first person, and the cycle of communication circuit keeps on moving from A to B and B to A, and that is how what we call circuit of speech. So basically the circuit of speech is all about how the communication takes place between the two persons. In fact, according to Saussure, no communication can take place without the help of two persons. This is basically the idea behind Saussure's circuit of speech. Now let's further simplify and try to understand through words. First person A, as I talked about, what happens? First a mental concept originates in the mind. Second, he wants the representation of the mental concept through sound. And according to Saussure, this is the initial process in communication. It is purely psychological, which I just talked about. Third, the first person A then uses his vocal organs to produce sounds. And this stage or this step is known as physiological process. This is a physiological process. Fourth, the sound waves travel from the mouth of the speaker to the ears of the listener. And this is a physical process. This is how things keep going when the first person A speaks or communicates. Now let's talk about the second person B. The fifth stage, the circuit continues in the second person B with another physiological action transmitting the syllable from the ears to the brain. Like the same mechanism that we talked about happening with the first person will also happen with the second person. Sixth stage, he decodes the message by making his own association between the sounds and the mental concept. As I talked about, that he decodes the message and then he prepares himself to speak. He needs sound as a representation of the mental concept, that is to say, decoding the message, and then he needs vocal organs too. Seventh, if the second person responds, a new act of speech begins. This is all about Ferdinand de Saussure's circuit of speech or model of communication. Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning. In this lesson, we will first talk about meaning of taxonomy. Then we will talk about meaning of cognitive, that is to say, what is cognition. And at the end, we will talk about Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning. Let's talk each one of them in detail. What is taxonomy? The word taxonomy is a French word which finds its origin in Greek. And in Greek we have the two terms from which the word taxonomy is made. The first one is taxis and the second one is nomia. And together when you join, it becomes the word taxonomy in French. And literally it means arrangement or distribution. So this is the literal interpretation of the word taxonomy. Now let's move and understand the definition of the word taxonomy. It refers to the branch of science concerned with classification, to classify something, to put something into order, to arrange something. In other words, we can say taxonomy is the science of naming, describing and classifying organisms. Here the word organisms is very important. Why? Because taxonomy in fact comes to language from the field of biology. That's why we say it includes all plants, animals and microorganisms of the world. In brief, all living things, all living beings. So we can say a taxonomy is a way to classify words into hierarchical groups. That is how we interpret in the field of language. And taxonomist, in fact, he is the person who sorts specimens, things to separate sets they believe represent a species or category. What is cognition? The word cognition is believed to have come from two Latin words. The first one is cognitio and the second one is cognito. And both of them have the same meaning, that is to say, get to know. So this is the literal interpretation of the word cognition. Now we try to discuss some more ideas about the word. In fact, the word cognition started being used from late Middle English, which has come from the Latin origin, and cognitive, which is the adjective form of the word cognition, and of course related to cognition. We can say, for example, cognitive skills, we can say cognitive learning, we can say cognitive theory, and so on. So in a number of ways we can use the term, particularly adjective, cognitive. Now let's talk about the word cognition. Cognition, and of course it's noun. It refers to mental action, where your mind is in action, where you apply your mind. You think about something. Not only you think about something, in fact you think deeply about something. In other words, we can say cognition is the process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through what? Through thought. So of course we apply our mind, and through the application of our mind we acquire knowledge and understand. When you are thoughtful, you gain knowledge. When you are thoughtless, careless, you don't apply your mind, you don't apply your thought, of course you cannot get or acquire knowledge, develop, understand. Then through experience. So knowledge not only comes from thought or from reading books, knowledge also comes from experiences of life. Then we have the senses, and knowledge also comes from the senses. Like you try to distinguish whether it is cool, whether it is warm, whether it is dark, whether there is light. All knowledge having gained through thought, experience, and the senses belong to the part of cognition. Briefly, we can say cognition refers to the input and storage of information and how that information or knowledge is then used to guide our thought and behavior. When we say input and storage of information, in other words, it is the same as acquiring knowledge and understanding of something. And then once you acquire knowledge, let that knowledge guide you to improve your way of thinking and behavior. Result from the process of cognition leads to the perception. It develops our perception. When you have good understanding of something, when you have acquired good knowledge about something, it develops your perception, your outlook towards something. It also improves your ability of sensation. You understand it in a much better way. You grasp it in a much better way. Idea. It develops your idea. It helps you think in a different direction. And intuition. It also develops your intuition. Intuition is something that happens spontaneously without having any influence of logic and reason. Or in other words, when you have acquired knowledge, better understanding of something, then this helps you develop all these things. And you must know that cognition is an important, not only important, in fact, the central part of learning process. Bloom's taxonomy. According to Bloom's taxonomy, there are 6 levels of cognitive learning. Each level is conceptually different. The first one is remembering. It refers to recall facts or basic concepts. The verbs we can use for this level are retrieve, bring back to memory, memorize. That is to say, whatever you have grasped, you have to bring back to your memory. You have to recall, you have to retrieve, you have to get to know what you have learned. The second one is understanding, and it refers to explain ideas or concept. The verbs we can use for this level are describe, recognize, identify. So understanding refers to the concept you can explain, the ideas you can explain. You have the full understanding of anything. You can describe well. You can recognize, you can identify. You don't have any problem. You know it from every aspect of it. That is the point here. The third one is applying. It refers to use gained information in new situations. And the verbs we can use for this level are execute, implement, solve. So whatever you have understood, whatever you have remembered, with the help of those 2 levels, that is to say, remembering and understanding, now it is time to apply your knowledge in new situations, execute your idea, implement it, and try to solve any difficult situation, any challenging moment, any challenging step you come across. That is basically the idea of learning. We continue our discussion. That is number 4, analyzing. It refers to draw connections among ideas, and the verbs we can use for this level are differentiate, organize, compare, contrast. So at this level, you analyze, you draw connections among different ideas. You try to differentiate between the 2 things among various segments. You try to compare and contrast, because only when you can compare and contrast, you have come to understand the concept in a much better way. We continue our discussion. That is 5th one, evaluating. It refers to justify a stand or decision. The verbs we can use for this level are argue, defend, judge. So evaluation is the stage in which you justify your idea, justify your saying, justify your opinion. You argue with the people, you defend your point of view, you come to the judgment. You are in a position to evaluate, to examine, to judge yourself what you have said. In a way you understand things. In a way you have developed the concept. That is the idea here. And the last one, that is the 6th one, is creating. It refers to produce new or original work. And the verbs we can use for this level are design, generate, formulate. You are now in a position to produce new ideas, new work, original work. You are in a position to generate ideas, formulate opinion, design a thing, bring something new to the world. You create something, you become a creator. These are the 6 levels of cognitive learning. And let's now review what we have just discussed so far. Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning consists of 6 fundamental elements. The first one is remembering. Second one is understanding. third one is applying, fourth one is analyzing, fifth one is evaluating, and sixth one is creating. Hope in this brief lesson you understand what is the meaning of Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive learning. Dell Hymes model of, we can also say Dell Hymes function of, design of. So we can say Dell Hymes model of speaking or language. Look here, when we say Dell Hymes model of speaking, here the word speaking does not refer to only verbal way of communication. Here the word speaking does not stand only for talking. Each individual letter in the word speaking is written in capital letter, and every letter has its own significance and importance. Therefore, it is a very comprehensive word. It does not refer to only oral way of communication. So in totality, if you try to interpret the word speaking, it refers to language. So sometimes we can also call Dell Hymes model of speaking, Dell Hymes model of language. And what is more important in this model of language, social and cultural context is very important for a successful communication to take place. We continue our discussion. Now we have 8 important letters in Dell Hymes model of language. As I just talked about the word speaking, which does not refer to only oral way of communication, verbal way of communication. And what are those 8 letters? If you look at, we have S, we have P, we have E, we have A, we have K, we have I, we have N, and we have G. And if you put each one of them together, it becomes a speaking. So it's a model of language. It's a function of language. Now let's discuss each one of the letters, its significance and importance, its meaning and its relevance in detail. We have the word speaking, model of language. The letter S stands for setting. The letter P stands for participants. The letter E stands for ends. The letter A stands for act. The letter K stands for key. The letter I stands for instrumentalities. The letter N stands for norms, and the letter G stands for genres. Now let's discuss importance of each letter. What does it convey? What does it mean? What does it refer? So we continue our discussion. Take the first letter, that is S, which stands for setting. And what is this? When we say setting, setting may be your place, maybe your background, maybe your time. Means at what time, at what place, in which background the communication took place. That is the idea. And your place, your background, your time, all together, it may be a campus, it may be a school, it may be your home, and it may be hotel. It could be any place. So one of the most important elements in this model of language is background, is setting, the place you choose, the time you choose, and that's very important. Without background, communication cannot take place. We continue and move on to the next. That is to say, P. What does it stand for? It stands for participants. And when we talk about participants, they refer to addresser. Who addresses? Who is the person? Addressee. Who's being addressed? Who is the hearer? Who is the listener? Who is the receiver? Speakers, hearers, which I just talked about. All these elements, all these words could be included within the category of participants. And broadly, you can also say the participants may be students, may be friends, may be customers, may be shopkeepers, maybe your members of family. There could be anyone. It could be referred to any person. We continue our discussion. That is to say, E. What does it stand for? It stands for ends, and it refers to goals, refers to objectives, refers to purpose, reasons. I mean, there must be some goals for any communication to take place. Goals are very important. Objectives are very important. If you don't have any goal, if you don't have any purpose, you don't have any reason, the communication itself cannot prop up. Communication cannot exist. Communication does not happen in a vacuum. We must have goals. We must have something to achieve, something to attain, something to talk about. That is the idea here. Now we continue the next. That is to say, A. It stands for act, and act may refer to two things, two ideas. The first is form, and the second is content. And the form is all about manner, and the content is more about matter, idea, thought. Manner is about how you order a set of words to express your style, your way of expression, your way of speaking. Okay? And content, what we say matter, idea or thought, is about what we want to convey. what we want to say, what we want to express, what we want to share. And together, if you put, meaning is conveyed to the listener, to the reader, to the hearer, to the participants. Now we continue to the next element of this model of language, that is K. It stands for key. And what is this? It refers to mood, tone, your state of mind. And this is very important because your state of mind is an important factor in the way you communicate with the people, you talk with the people, you express something in writing, and so on. And you can refer them to like your happy mood, or your tone is happy, or your state of mind is happy, or likewise sad, or humor. A state of mind is very important in communication to take place. Now we continue with some more ideas about this model of language. That is I. It stands for instrumentalities. They refer to channel or medium. And when you talk about channel, when we talk about medium, means it is through what you want to communicate, through what you want to express and share. That is to say, whether it is a prose style, prose way of writing, prose way of talking, whether it is poetic style, what we say poetry, or poetic way of expression, or in a dramatic form, what we call drama, in a story form, storytelling. So there are different ways and means, what we call channel or medium, through which we communicate. Sometimes as a speaker, as a writer, as a poet, as a teacher, as a student, as a normal person, as a normal human being. So we must have the channels, we must have the instrumentalities through which we communicate our language. We express our language. We continue our discussion. That is to say, we have the next one, N. It stands for norms. And what does this refer to? It refers to social norms. Cultural milieu, they are your guiding principles. Without social norms, without cultural milieu, you will not be properly guided in what way to talk about, in what way to carry on your ideas forward to the people. That is what we mean to say is how we talk in office, how we talk in college, how we talk when we are at home, because they set social norms for us. They provide guiding principles to us in what way to talk, whether your tone is formal or informal, whether you are becoming too official in talking or unofficial in talking. So these are the most important elements when we talk. When you are in the market, when you meet your friends, you talk in a different manner. But the same friend, when you meet in the office of your principal, your social norms guide you to talk differently. So norms are very important guiding principles in the way we communicate, in the way we express our language. We continue our discussion. That is to say, we have G, and it stands for genres. And what are they talking about? It may be interview, it may include gossip, proverbs, prayers, and so on. So these are 8 fundamental principles through which we communicate with the people. We express our language. Dell Hymes' model of speaking is a linguistic model, and this model in modern time has attained a lot of attention. Hope you understand the concept. Hello and welcome to a new topic, that is Roman Jakobson's model of the functions of language. Before we go deep into the topic, let's first talk about what is communication, because communication forms the part of the functions of language. The word communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to share or to be in relation with. This makes sense because sharing and to be in relation with someone form the basis of communication. We have some more ideas about communication. Normally, to participate in the communication process, we need at least one person to share information. We also need one more person to receive that information. So what we get is that at least for communication to be successful, we need 2 persons to impart the information and to receive the information. Keeping in view, let's now talk about what Roman Jakobson has ideas about the functions of language. But before I start, let's have a brief introduction about who Roman Jakobson is. He's a famous Russian-American linguist. He looks at what needs to be present in the process of linguistic communication beyond the simple relationship of sending and receiving information. We have some more ideas about this man, Roman Jakobson. He introduced a well-known theoretical model of the functions of language. The model distinguishes 6 elements or factors of communication which are necessary for communication to occur, which are necessary for communication to happen or to take place, or for communication to be successful, without which communication in fact cannot happen at all, cannot exist at all. So these 6 factors are very, very important. What are they? Let's talk about each one of them through this diagram. For any communication to be successful, first we need the addresser. And who is the addresser? He is the sender. He may be the speaker, he may be the writer who writes the poem, who writes a book, he may be the speaker who delivers the speech. So what does it mean is that we must have an addresser. Addresser refers to sender, and sender may be anyone, maybe a normal person, maybe a teacher, maybe a doctor, maybe a writer, maybe a poet, any one of us who can be referred to as sender or the addresser. So the sender, the addresser sends a message, content, idea, opinion, or reflection of thought. That is the second point. To the whom? To the addressee, to the receiver, to the listener, to the reader, to the audience. That audience may be an individual person, may be a large group of people, whosoever they are, can be referred to as addressee, that is to say, receiver. And we continue. To be operative, the message requires a what? Context, situation. Without context, no communication can take place. Without situation, no communication can take place. Without background, without any reason, there must be a reason for any communication to take place. If I am at the moment talking to you, it means I have the context. And what is the context at the moment? My context, my background, my reason is that I would like to tell you about Roman Jakobson's model of the functions of language. This is the context here at the moment. And this is making me speak to you, talk to you, explain to you. So for any communication to be successful, after we have the addresser sends the message to the addressee, we must have the context. We must have the situation. If we don't have, we cannot make any communication happen. Referred to a code common to the addresser and the addressee. So we need a code. Here, what does it mean? Code. Code refers to language. There must be a common code between the addresser and the addressee. That is to say, there must be common language, must be shared by the addresser and the addressee. For example, at the moment, my code is English language. It is in this code I am speaking. So, the English language at the moment is our common code that develops communication between you and me. So, code here refers to the language. 2 persons must share the same language, must share the same code. That code, that language may be English, may be Arabic, may be Chinese, may be Korean, may be French, whatever that language is. But the point is that if the language is not common to the addresser, sender, and to the addressee, receiver, then communication cannot take place. For example, if I know English and I speak to you, and unfortunately the other person, he does not know English and I speak, can the communication take place? No, it cannot. Impossible. So here we must have the common code between the addresser and the addressee through which we can exchange ideas. And finally, the 6th point is contact, a physical channel and psychological connection between addresser and addressee. Here we have 2 points. Contact means physical channel. Sometimes I may talk to you sitting in front of you. That is our physical channel, physical connection. Sometimes we are having tea and we are talking. So that having tea and talking in front of each other, that is our physical channel. The channel, way of contacting or the mode of contact could be many. For example, I may call my friend and talk. So the mobile may be a channel. Not only the channel that is important, but also the psychological connection. For example, I am talking to you and psychologically you are not present, you are not attentive to what I am speaking, then sometimes you are lost somewhere. Can the communication take place? Can that communication be successful? I keep on speaking and psychologically you are lost elsewhere. So there is no psychological connection between what I am speaking and what you are receiving. So the communication cannot take place. So 6th point is that we need a physical channel, either talking together, sitting in front of each other, or maybe through any more through any physical contact, maybe radio, maybe television, maybe mobile, through which you can communicate to your friend, to the audience. And at the same time, we must have psychological connection, because if you don't have the psychological connection between the addresser and the addressee, the communication cannot take place. So these are 6 most important factors, elements in the functions of language, or for any communication to be successful or to take place. And I think this is very scientific analysis of the functions of language, or how communication takes place, or how communication should be successful. Hope you understand the concept. Thank you and goodbye.